What's up guys, my name is Joe and we are back with another episode of British Guy Reacts, and today we're going to be reacting to how every team in the NFL got its name and its identity. Now this video is 3 years old, so unless there's been any new teams in the last 3 years, all the teams should be covered in this one. It is quite a long video, it's a 30-minute video, plus me pausing to speak. It's probably going to bump it to like 40-45 minutes, so this is going to be part 1 of part 2. I want to see 500 likes on this video for part 2 to drop. Not much to ask for, that's what we're asking for though. If you are new around here, subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, comment down below. I'm a British guy who's been learning about American football. We've learned how the game works to a certain level, but we still need to figure out the history of these teams and what the identity of each team is. So that's what we're doing today. We're going to jump straight into this one. Let's go.
The NFL is currently made up of 32 different franchises. But did you know over 75 have existed in league history? We're turning back the gridiron clock. It's the official evolution of the NFL, 100 years in the making.
Let's go.
The NFL was born in 1920, known originally as the American Professional Football Association. It started with 14 teams, 12 of them clumped together in the Midwest, 2 others playing in New York.
So the Midwest is the birthplace of football, is that what it's telling me? The NFL's definitely got a more catchy name.
And in order to join this group, you had to put up $100 for a franchise.
You'll notice many of the early franchises didn't even have official team logos.
Yeah, look at that Dayton Triangles logo. And these ones, DHHP, MF.
That's because teams were so informal back then, they just didn't even create them.
Jim Thorpe was unanimously elected president because of the name recognition that he could garner for this National Pro Football League.
Of the 14 original teams, only 2 would stick around to celebrate the league's 100th anniversary. The Decatur Staleys, known today as the Chicago Bears, and the oldest team in the NFL, the Chicago Cardinals, who have since built their nest in Arizona.
The story behind the Cardinals name really goes back to Chris O'Brien when he purchased the uniforms that the Cardinals were going to wear. He purchased them from the Chicago Maroons, and they were faded, and somebody referred to the jerseys as maroon color, and he said,
look at these jerseys, man. Dude, this is what our old school football jerseys kind of looked like back in England as well. So the NFL's been going 100 years now. That's impressive. I'm noticing the guys are a lot less athletic back in the day, as you would expect.
those aren't maroon, that's cardinal red, and that cardinal name stuck.
While those 2 franchises are the oldest in the game, they did not win the league's first ever title. That distinction belongs to the Akron Pros, who finished that inaugural season undefeated at 8-0-3.
Isn't that where LeBron's from?
3 times. The Pros weren't just the league's first champions either. They were also the first team in the league to break the color barrier.
The Akron Pros are one of those teams that are lost to history, but Fritz Pollard.
Frederick Douglass, Fritz Pollard, what a guy.
Was both a player and a coach for that Akron Pros team.
And since diamond-filled Super Bowl rings were clearly not the rage just yet, all the Pros players received this tiny gold football pendant for their efforts. The Pros were also the first and last recipients of the league's championship trophy, known as the Brunswick Balke Callender Cup, which to this day represents one of the greatest mysteries in NFL lore. It was lost after that first season, and this is the only known picture of it.
That's crazy that happened, because we have a similar story with the World Cup. The World Cup got stolen one year, and I'm not sure whether they ever figured it out or not, but we have the same lore going on over here.
Following the league.
If you are enjoying today's video, please click the subscribe button down below. It only takes you 1 second to do, and it helps the channel out a lot. And you get to carry on seeing my amazing videos, so please, just go on, do it, click it. Thank you.
First year, 2 teams renamed themselves, and 1 moved. The Decatur Staleys, setting up shop in Chicago and winning their first ever championship while they were at it. The Chicago Tigers, meanwhile, folded, but 8 new teams joined.
Okay,
the league was now up to 20.
Oh, I can see the Green Bay Packers in there. You guys have been telling me they're a team full of history. I was thinking of doing a separate video on them, but we're setting the scene first. We'll just do everyone. The New York Brickley Giants.
21
you still have the Giants,
all
right?
Still located in Midwestern and Eastern states. Several of the new additions didn't last long. The Tonawanda Cardex holding the ultimate one-hit wonder crown, playing just 1 league game. thereby making it the shortest-lived franchise in NFL history.
Oh, man.
The Dexys Midnight Runners of teams. The Green Bay Packers, however, would stick around, cementing itself as one of the most storied franchises in the league.
In Green Bay, Wisconsin, a team was founded with $500 put up by a meatpacking company. They became known as the Packers.
Oh, so that's why they called the Packers, because it was by a meatpacking company. There we go.
Green Bay Packers were one of those first teams that stadium was constructed with football as its main sport being played in it.
No other team in the league has played in the same city under the same name for as long as Green Bay has. Following the 21 season, 7 teams left the league and 4 new ones joined. The Milwaukee Badgers, the Oorang Indians, the Racine Legion, and the Toledo Maroons.
Okay.
The Staleys, meantime, made a good call and changed their name to the Bears.
It's a good call. Bears is a much better name. And they're still
Their
around,
owner,
right?
George Halas, picked Bears because they originally were playing their games in the same stadium as the Chicago Cubs. Halas not only wanted to connect his new team to the more established baseball franchise, but he also reasoned that football players in general were bigger than baseball players, so the name made sense on multiple levels.
How long has baseball been around?
But the even bigger name change that took place that year was the leagues. The American Professional Football Association was out to be known forever on as the National Football League.
NFL.
I think a lot of that comes from wanting to be looked at or viewed as a national organization.
As the 1923 season got underway, it did so without the Evansville Crimson Giants, who bowed out. The Cleveland Indians, Duluth Kellys, and St. Louis All-Stars all checked in. In 1924, 5 teams left. 3 joined, the cities of Frankfort, Kenosha, and Kansas City all being granted membership in the league. A year later, though, Kenosha, Racine, and Minneapolis all left. The Blues changed their name to the Cowboys, Canton rejoined, and Detroit, Providence, Pottsville, and New York were all added to the mix.
What's going on in Pottsville, hey? Some of these places I've never heard of. Crazy that they had football teams back in the day. I'm wondering if this Kansas City Blues and now the Cowboys is going to change to the Dallas Cowboys and then Kansas City Chiefs get a team back later, the Chiefs, or whether they're just going to change the name again. We're going to find out. Let's go.
The Giants, the lone team to stick, making them the 4th oldest team in the league.
Tim Mara set up his storefront in the Polo Grounds, located on Upper Manhattan's Coogan's Bluff.
The New York Giants name came about really to attach pro football team with their Major League Baseball counterpart, trying to gain some of that fandom
I didn't know
from
the
Major
baseball
League
team was
Baseball.
called that.
That means ultimately the name Giants was inspired by all the skyscrapers in New York.
Makes sense.
In 1926, 3 teams changed their names, including the league's first ever champs, the Akron Pros, who switched to the Indians. 3 franchises were dropped, but the Racine Legion came back as the Tornadoes, and 4 others were also added. The Brooklyn Lions, the Hartford Blues, the Louisville Colonels, and the Los Angeles Buccaneers, marking the first time the league had a team out west, although they never actually played any games in LA.
Ultimately, the LA
I was going to say that back in the day, that must have been tough being so far away from everyone else. They're traveling for games, but they didn't play any games there, which is a bit weird. So they were the Buccaneers. Now you have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right?
LA Buccaneers played as a traveling team and really took up shop in Chicago. Played out of that city and then traveled as a barnstorming team, really.
The NFL really shook things up the following season when it got rid of more than half of its member clubs. The Cleveland Bulldogs were back, and the New York Yankees were added. 12 teams now making up the young league. And
Yankees.
yes, I said the New York Yankees. The NFL was down to 10 teams the next year, Duluth and Buffalo losing their spots in the league, while the Cleveland Bulldogs moved to Detroit and became the Wolverines. But they didn't last long, one of 3 teams to fold up shop the next season. Buffalo came back, and the Orange Tornadoes, Staten Island Stapletons, and Minneapolis Red Jackets all joined. Come on!
There's some very good names there and some awful ones, and I don't like this abbreviation of SIS. It's not a good one for you.
Now, as the NFL began its second decade in existence, the turnover of teams was starting to slow down a little bit. 3 franchises were dropped, 2 joined. The Portsmouth Spartans, who are known today as the Detroit Lions and are the 5th oldest team in the NFL. In 1931, the Cleveland Indians were back. However, the Red Jackets and Tornadoes dropped out. 1932 was another significant blip on the NFL timeline. The Indians, Steamrollers, and Yellow Jackets departed, and the Boston Braves were added, which you know today is the Washington Redskins. But by adding only one team and losing...
I've heard the Boston Braves before, though. Why have I heard that name before? Because I definitely wasn't knocking about watching American football in 1932. Is it an NHL team or something? The Boston Braves?
In 3, the league was down to 8 teams.
Why have I heard that name?
It was the smallest the league ever got.
You had the league really trying to protect itself and stay with fewer teams, but have them more successful.
Then in 1933, the Cincinnati Reds were introduced to pro football, along with 2 Pennsylvania franchises that would establish permanent roots in the league. The
Philadelphia Eagles, been knocking about since 1933, fair play to them. This is crazy in the early years how many teams were coming and going. This is absolutely insane.
Pittsburgh Pirates, who eventually changed their name to the Steelers, and the Philadelphia Eagles.
Okay.
It's funny when you read the stories leading up to the first game that the team played. Lud Ray was very optimistic. We're a first-year team, but we're going to surprise people. Well, they went out and they played their first game against the New York Giants and lost 56-0.
Ooh,
Philadelphia owners Bert Bell and Lud Ray settled on the name Eagles in honor of the symbol used by the National Recovery Act that was part of Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal that followed in the wake of the Great Depression. The 33 season was also when the owner of the Boston Braves decided it was time for a new name.
George Preston Marshall wanted to stick with the Native American theme, so he didn't want to keep the Braves name because that was the name of the...
But different... Oh, so it's the baseball team called the Boston Braves. That's where I've...
So he didn't want to keep the Braves name because that was the name of the baseball franchise, so he chose the Redskins.
That season was also the first in which...
I've seen Washington's called the Redskins. Is that not a bit of a controversial name? I mean, I don't really know the whole Native American like history and stuff and terminology. Seems a bit of an odd name. Redskins.
Divisions were created, which set up the first official NFL championship game.
Bears ball on their own 12-yard line.
Prior to that, the league champion was simply the team that had the best record at the end of the season. The Bears would represent the West, the Giants the East, with Chicago beating New York 23-21 for the title.
That game really was the beginning of the popularity of pro football.
The following year saw the...
There's some men out there not even wearing a helmet playing the game. Look at this Donny. Where's he gone? Oh, I went back too far.
Set up the first official...
Oh, there was a Donny not wearing a helmet. Oh, there he is. Look at this guy. Ew. Silly man.
Present the West to 21 for the title.
That game really was the beginning of the popularity of pro football.
The following year saw the same exact 10 teams return, marking the first time in the league's history there were no changes. But mid-season, the Cincinnati Reds folded and were replaced by the St. Louis Gunners for the last 3 games. It would be the only 3 games they would play as an NFL franchise. Also in 1934, the Portsmouth Spartans moved to Detroit and changed their name to the Lions. The name was inspired by baseball's Detroit Tigers, though the team had a different explanation. Quote, "The lion is considered the monarch of the jungle, and we hope to be the monarch of the league."
That's why England has the 3 lions on the shirt.
From 1935 to 1936, the same 9 teams remained, but it was in 36 that the NFL held its first ever draft.
Before 1936, every player coming out of college was a free agent. And a lot of times, those players were going to the teams with the biggest checkbook.
The Eagles used the first ever pick on Chicago Maroons halfback and first ever winner of the Heisman Trophy, Jay Berwanger. But Berwanger would never play it down in the NFL. The Bears, who acquired his rights from the Eagles, were not able to meet Berwanger's salary demands, which ultimately led him to take a job in sales for a rubber company. It's true.
How times have changed, man. It's crazy that, innit? I know, I don't know about a lot of these players, but in our sports back in the day, people were working jobs in factories, and then you played football for fun. It was almost like the rich people watching the poor people play sports. That's how it worked. People with a lot of money going watching poor people run around play football. And now, and like, obviously you still have to have a bit of money to go and watch games, but your average sports fan is kind of like working class, right? I'm working class. All my friends who watch sports are working class people. middle and upper class do enjoy it too as well, but, you know, but the players, they're the rich ones. They're the rich folk these days. Crazy how times have changed. But I'm glad that they get recognised because they're supremely talented, these guys. So
1937, the Boston Redskins made the move to Washington, and the NFL grew back to 10 teams, awarding a franchise to the Cleveland Rams. These are the same Rams that call Los Angeles home today. The name Rams came about because their GM at the time, Damon "Buzz" Wetzel's favorite college football team, had always been the Fordham Rams, so they simply copied it. As the 30s came to a close, the league was starting to stabilize. There were no changes to the NFL landscape in either 1938 or 39. But 1939 was monumental for the future of the league, even if its participants didn't realize it at the time.
The Brooklyn Dodgers hosted the Philadelphia Eagles before a crowd of 13,000 fans. Few, if any, in attendance even noticed the cameras of NBC station W2XBS.
First televised one.
Their presence marked the first ever telecast of a professional football game.
The first ever...
2 cameras, you know, it said there. NFL, NBC just needed 2 cameras and 8 people. God knows how many cameras they use these days to film sports matches. You just see them, don't you? They're everywhere. Probably like 50 to 100, I don't know. That might be an over-exaggeration, but at the same time, it's probably not. Because when you've got the photographers in there as well, you have these sky cams, the drone cams, rooftop cams, you have blimps going over, helicopter cams sometimes. It's different sports. It's mad.
Presence marked the first ever telecast of a professional football game.
The first ever TV broadcast was only seen in parts of New York, but the seed was planted. The game's financial future, stability, and popularity were all secured with the marriage between the NFL and television. The 1940 season was significant for 2 reasons. First, Pittsburgh traded in the Pirates nickname.
They changed their name to the Steelers because of a steel worker ultimately proposed the name Steelers, and that stuck, you know, knowing that the steel industry was so big in that area.
That year also saw the first iteration of the now famous NFL Shield, the league unveiling the
It's actually pink.
iconic logo for the very first time. And the Chicago Bears introduced its first official team logo, a black bear running with a football. Now here's the thing, most NFL teams have updated their logos several times over. So if you pay close attention to the map, you'll see how those updates happen.
Okay.
The league's member clubs continued to remain steady until 1943. That's the season the Cleveland Rams suspended operations for a year, but did not fold. It was due in part because of so many of their players were drafted into military service for World War II, which is also what led the Eagles and Steelers to merge, taking on the unofficial nickname, the Steagles. Yeah!
That's a horrible name, man. It's the reason behind it. They were forced into it because of the World War, but come on, man. The Steagles.
Taking on the unofficial nickname, the Steagles. Yeah!
The
Steel Eagles would have been better.
Steelers struggled for years and years. It took them a decade and merging with the Philadelphia Eagles before they had their first ever winning season.
In 1944, the Eagles were back on their own, but Pittsburgh was still on shaky ground, so they looked for a new team to merge with, and they found a willing partner in the Chicago Cardinals, the combined teams known as Card Pit. The league also added the Boston Yanks. The Cleveland Rams returned, and the Brooklyn Dodgers changed their name to the Brooklyn Tigers. In '45, the Cardinals and Steelers merger was over. Both teams went back on their own, but the Brooklyn Tigers and Boston Yanks joined forces to form a new team known simply as the Yanks. Like the previous 2 mergers, it didn't last long. In 1946, the Tigers folded, so the Boston Yanks were back on their own. That same season saw the Rams pack up and head west for the sunny skies of Los Angeles, marking the first time actual games were played in LA proper.
The Cleveland Rams won a championship in 1945, and then their owner, Dan Reeves, moved them out to LA.
That's tough. Imagine being a fan and your owner does that. That's tough. What's this?
1945, and then their owner, Dan Reeves, moved them out to LA. This is maybe the only time that I can think of where a professional team won a championship and then moved locations.
1947 and 48 came and went without any additions, subtractions, or...
I mean, sorry to pause so much here, guys. This is really fascinating to me because this doesn't happen in English sports. Like, we don't franchise, really. Like, the main point of a sports team in England has always been the city. That, like, you can't just... A football team would never move city. Manchester United would never become Liverpool United. Like, it's not franchised in the same way. So this stuff is really interesting to me. Kind of crazy and kind of weird that an owner would do that to a fan base and to an area. I don't really like it, to be honest. The fact that they can move. But it's just different, right? It's just different. It's the way things work over there. It's just a different sport, different history. Fascinating to learn about, though. I just can never imagine it happening in our sports over here. But there you go. There you have it.
1947 and 48 came and went without any additions, subtractions, or relocations. But in 49, the Boston Yanks moved to New York and became the New York Bulldogs. Then came the next big expansion when the NFL merged with the All-America Football Conference in 1950, adding 3 new teams. The San Francisco 49ers, the Baltimore Colts, though not the same Baltimore Colts franchise that would emerge a few years later, and the Cleveland Browns.
The Browns opened their season against the Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia, and with some 71,000 in attendance, most of them National League fans of former years, the Browns had shocked the professional football world with a rude 35-10 jolting to the Eagles.
The Browns formed in 1945, and they're the only team named after a person, the inspiration coming from Cleveland's first head coach and GM, Paul Brown.
Some people claim that it's more about Joe Louis being named the Brown Bomber, but I really do think in this area, Paul Brown is football, and his name really is the backing behind the Cleveland Browns being named the Browns.
The 49ers name.
Right, guys, I know it's annoying to stop at this point, but we're halfway through the video. We're in 1950. We're going to stop it there. If I do a 40-minute video, most of you guys are going to click off halfway through. So I'm going to split it up into 2 parts. If you do enjoy this video and you do want to see part 2, like the video because I'll drop it. I'm going to film it now. I'm going to carry on filming. But I'm only going to release it when we get 500 likes. Because you guys do leave a lot of comments. A lot of you do subscribe to the channel, but not many of you like the video. So just give the video a like if you are enjoying it, and we'll drop part 2. If you are new around here, please do subscribe. This video is really interesting so far. Like I said, it's fascinating to me the way teams move around, the way teams come and go. It's so different to what I'm used to, but it's really interesting to see how the names have changed, where the names originally came from, how the logos are changing, how the sport's growing and growing. You got your first West Coast team in LA. I'm excited to see how the next 70 years panned out. So join me for the next one. See you soon. Take it easy. Peace.